Good evening. I want to welcome everyone here to the town of Andover, the 2021-2022 annual budget meeting. I'm going to read the notice for everyone. The electors and citizens qualified to vote in town meetings in the town of Andover are hereby notified that the annual budget meeting for the town of Andover will be held at the Andover Elementary School in the gymnasium, 35 School Road, on Thursday, May 6th, 2021 at 7 p.m. for the following purpose: to choose a moderator for said meeting, to receive the budget for the fiscal year July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022 as prepared by the Board of Finance, to approve a budget for the fiscal year July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022, and then 4, our favorite, to adjourn. Copies of the budget are available in the town clerk's office. They were available here as well. And voting by absentee ballot is not permitted for this meeting. Face masks are required for all attendees when not speaking, and 6 feet of social distancing per person except for those living together in a residential unit. And before we get started with the meeting, I'd like to remind you it's a public meeting. Please be utmost respect to everyone involved, and we need to sit there and move the meeting along. So the first thing to do is to choose a moderator. Do we have any nominations? You can go. I can't see you. Kathy?
I'd like to nominate Wally Martin as moderator.
Okay. Second. Any further nominations? Okay, Wally, the meeting is yours.
I know that it's going to be difficult with the masks for everyone to speak, so we're going to have you come up to the podium if you want to speak, so you can talk in the microphone so everyone can hear you. A couple reminders about this meeting. At this meeting, you can only reduce the budget. You cannot add anything to the budget that's been presented, or will be presented, excuse me, by the Board of Finance. At the end of this meeting, if you vote to send this budget to referendum, the referendum will be May 18th, next door at the town office building from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. to vote on the final budget. And at this point, I'll turn it over to the Board of Finance for their presentation.
Thank you, Wally. I'd like to welcome everybody here today. This has been a long and grueling process, and we have more to do, so thank you for your participation. I know this is a little unconventional, but I'd like to start this presentation with a little story. For many years, I've worked at the Mark Twain House in Hartford as a tour guide. It was kind of a weekend thing, and really enjoyed that. And one year when I was there, we had to get a new alarm system installed. And Charlie, who was our facilities guy, he's a great guy, he's a good sense of humor, but it was his job to get the alarm system installed and train everybody in its use and make sure it was working properly. So right when you walked in the front door of the carriage house, this is where we had our offices and our, the guys had the break room there was a panic button installed. And that panic button was there in case of emergency, obviously. And Charlie dutifully labeled that panic button. And it said, "Warning, this panic button goes directly to the Hartford Emergency Services, to be used only in case of extreme emergency. For example, fire, flood, or budget development." So, I always remember that when I think about this process. So. Well, we have a lot of slides and a lot of ground to cover here. Thank you, Wally, for the reminder of what we can do here, because that's part of the presentation. So I asked you to kind of stick with me. I'm going to try to roll through these pretty quickly, but there's important information. I know a lot of you have been following this process as we go along, but I know all of you probably have, that maybe not been able to see all of it. So there's going to be lots of opportunities to ask questions, make motions, etc. Okay, this is basically what we're going to roll through. We've got the budget process. I'm going to just touch on that a little bit. It is here in the presentation, but most of you are probably aware of that. We're going to go through the expenditures, including the education expenditures for RAM and Andover Elementary School, and then we'll talk about the town general budget. There's two components of that, the capital budget and the operating budget. We're going to talk about revenue, okay? Revenue means several different things, and that's an important part of our budget. It's not just what we're spending, it's what we're bringing in and how. Then I'll go through a summary, and then we'll have a question and answer period, followed by motions and any budget amendments that happen to take place. I'm not going to read through this whole thing, but this is basically the budget process. It is quite a multi-step thing. In fact, I think Eric had 3 or 4 slides here. I whittled it down to 1. Thank you. So, but it's a pretty involved process. The town departments develop their budget. Eric presents it to the Board of Selectmen. The school administration develops their budget. They present it to the school board. It goes through various iterations of workshops. Finally gets to a budget that's presented to the Board of Finance. We work through it and ultimately come up with a recommended budget to present to you tonight. And as Wally said, if we do pass a budget tonight, then it'll go for referendum for town vote. So it's not even done tonight. A couple things to note here. On May 4th, earlier this week, the RAM budget referendum took place, and that budget did pass. So those numbers that are in this spreadsheet are final. We'll talk a little more about that. Highly important, because that's the biggest line item in our budget. And then May 6th, of course, today's annual town budget meeting. This is from the charter. The town charter explains pretty explicitly how we manage the budget process. Wally just kind of went through it, so I'm going to go ahead and blow through this. Although we made the important point that we cannot add to this budget tonight. Okay? And the Board of Finance took that into consideration when we came up with the recommended budget. We can reduce line items or reduce the overall budget, but we cannot add to the budget tonight. In addition, there's a note that the school district has presented a budget with various line items. It is not within the purview of the Board of Finance or the town in any way to control those line item spending, only the overall line item for the school. Something else is the matter. Okay, this graph, you've probably seen it before if you've been watching this stuff and been around for a few years. You can see basically it's a breakout of where your budget expenditures are for the town. Number 1 item at the bottom is the RAM Middle School and High School. It's approximately 40% of our town's expenditures. Number 2 is the AES budget at 32%, and then the town operating and capital budgets at 27%. And then there's a small line item for the AES debt, or to pay off the bonds that we took out a few years ago to pay for some of the capital. Okay, so this is our budget. We have a proposed budget of $12,656,038. This represents a spending increase of about $120,000, almost $121,000, which is just about a 1% increase. Okay, doesn't sound too bad. The problem is that we don't have a lot of offsets in terms of the revenue. So when we get down to the end, you're going to see that the effect of this budget increase is larger than it might appear. Going into the line items, and we're going to talk about these in detail, so I'm not going to spend much time on it here, but the Andover Board of Education, we have an increase in that line item from the previous year, about $175,000, represents about 4.5% increase. The debt service from the bond, that's going to be paid off this year, but we have 1 more year to pay that down. It's about $93,000, it's 3.6% less. The RAM budget is also going down for Andover. So we'll talk a little more about that. It doesn't mean that the overall budget for RAM is going down. In fact, in Andover, from the point of Andover, we're going to be paying more per pupil. And then the town operating budget is going up about 1.6% to the town budget. Okay, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the education budgets, just the numbers and the highlights. This has been discussed quite a bit, not only at the Board of Finance meetings, but especially at the Board of Ed meetings, etc. And we do have representatives from the school district here to answer questions as we go along. Okay, first one is the RAM. RAM budget levy, the proposed budget, 31 million and change. This is actually a 1.83% increase in their budget. Okay, a lot of people make comments about the RAM budget, but that is what it is. We do not have any control over it except when we vote. So it's something to keep in mind. The RAM proposed capital budget is about 11.77% increase. Andover's percentage of the levy decreases from 17.34% of that budget to 17.13%. And that's just because our number of students relative to other towns dropped. We are still paying more per student this year for RAM than we were before. Just a note there, RAM returned the unexpected fund balance, unexpended fund balance from last year to the towns to offset that increase. So it's something many of us lobbied for, and it was an appropriate thing to do it. So Andover's total levy for RAM is $5,119,758. A decrease of about $108,000 from last year. And as I noted, the RAM budget passed this week, so it is what it is at this point. The Andover Elementary School budget. The Andover Board of Education initially requested a budget of about $4,122,000 to cover operational capital. Board of Finance, during our deliberations over this budget, reduced that recommended amount just by $44,000 to $4,078,008. This is a 4.5% increase in the budget. And I know there's been a lot of different opinions about this particular budget. Again, we have members of the Board of Education here and the administration to answer any questions that you may have. They're really not necessarily going to be things that we can directly answer here. And then the debt service on the town bond for AES is $93,000. The good news is that retires that debt. We will no longer have that debt next year. So that's the good news. Okay, so let's take a look at the town budget. The town budget, not including educational expenses. This is just the town's budget for the town of Andover, apart from education. There are two components to the town budget that are important. It's important to understand the difference. There's this operational budget, which we're going to review first. And that's just the day-to-day activities that happen in the town. The salaries for the town employees, the public works department, the spending that kind of goes on to provide the day-to-day services that we have here in the town. Okay. And then we have the capital budget. The capital budget is really for larger capital investments. That can be equipment, it can be roadways, bridges, etc. And we'll talk about how that's broken out as we go further in the presentation. Okay, town operating budget. So we had an overall decrease this year from $2,536,051 to $2,479,158. So we had a net savings within the town operations of $56,892. So several factors really drove that. Eric's got them listed here. Mostly driven by reduction in salary and benefits. And Eric, working with the town employees and the Board of Selectmen, and as well as the Andover Elementary School, he did some things that are very laudable. We were able to combine some positions and gain some efficiencies within the town. That's hard to do in a smaller town like this. We combined the town finance department with AES. Maybe you've seen Sherry, our new finance director. She's now acting in that role for both AES and the town, which eliminated kind of a duplicate position, or at least a half-time position. The tax collector for the town was reduced to part-time from full-time. We combined the assistant town clerk and building department administrative functions into a single role. And we assigned the senior coordinator role to the assistant assessor on a long-term basis, all of which helped reduce the overall salary and benefit cost of it. And if it snows a lot next year, I'm never going to hear the end of this, but the Board of Finance also reduced the snow removal budget by $10,000. And it's not to say that we plan on reducing the snow removal in the town. If we do have a heavy snow year and a lot of heavy snow events, we're going to have to dip into contingency funds in order to cover that. But the general feeling was that we shouldn't budget for the worst case scenario there. That's what our contingency fund is for, to kind of cover that cost. So we reduced that line item by $10,000 in the Board of Finance. So please, if it snows a lot, be nice to us on Facebook, all right? We'll take care of it. Okay, so some increases to the town operating budget. We did have some of those as well. First of all, this is kind of a paper increase, if you will. The Andover, even Marlboro Youth Services increased from $46,536 to $88,684. But that wasn't really a true overall increase. What was decided by AHM was to basically just bill the town for all the services provided to Andover residents. Previously, this had been divided between the town, and then some went to the AES budget, and then some went to the grant budget. So it just made it a little more transparent about what the costs were, and made it a little simpler for everyone involved, by just billing one entity, which is the town. So you actually had a savings in AES and grant as a result of that. We shifted the expense from the RAM and AES, the Public Works Supervisor. We had a new non-union position, hourly to salary. We had a new Public Works Supervisor. I don't think that was the right thing to do. We had the right candidate for the job, and it made sense. We also had some significant additional election-related expenses. Thank you, pandemic, right? We had a lot of things we had to do a little differently, and that meant a lot more time for the registrars and others to run the elections in town. Okay, then we get to the capital budget. There's a lot of slides here. Stay with me. And so we'll kind of talk about it. But this is where a lot of the spending in the town goes. And it's important spending, and it means a lot for our future here. An overall increase in the capital budget this year from $869,115 to $979,150. Okay? $110,000 increase. It's almost all road and bridge work funds. You'll see that that's not almost all. The majority of the capital expending that we plan to do has to do with the roads and bridges. And anybody who's been paying attention to the town meetings or Eric's presentations or the Board of Finance meetings knows that we go through this a lot. Talk a little bit more about the road conditions, get into the particular funds. We also had an increase due to the multi-use / community center. Okay, this is often referred to as the senior center. We had a fire department equipment fund went up, and the public works equipment fund went up. Okay, so this is kind of the explanatory page that talks about why we have a high capital expenditures that are coming up here. The town of Andover has really significantly underfunded our equipment and infrastructure over several decades. Again, we've been talking about this a lot. It doesn't take much to drive around on the roads and see that a lot of them are in really bad shape. We've done some Band-Aid type fixes to them, but we have a long way to go. We've neglected that maintenance for a long time. This is overall going to increase the cost of the taxpayers over the next 20 years as we catch up to deferred maintenance. And we kick this can down the road. The problem with kicking the can down the road and the maintenance is it just accelerates the road tear. If you don't stay on top of it, it's just going to get worse. You don't maintain your roof, you're going to be tearing it all off and redoing it, right? It's that kind of thing. So capital budget is just a word about how we get there. They're derived from the town planning documents. There's a 10-year capital plan for the fire department. There's a public works equipment capital plan. Andover Town Buildings and Properties, the CIP report. The CIP is the Capital Improvements Planning Committee. So they're the people that meet on a regular basis to talk about how we can invest in our infrastructure and where we need to spend our money. On that. Andover culvert inspection reports. You're going to hear the word culvert a lot. We'll talk about doing the work here. DOT inspection reports on the town bridges. That's where we have a lot of our deficits in terms of our infrastructure right now. Some real problems. We also have our road maintenance and improvement plan, which is just taking care of the roads in general. And just some more facts and statistics here. And Garrett loves these things, but he's pounding this drum, and it's an important one to pound. We have 42% of our roads are rated either poor or failing. 2 bridges over the Hop River need replacement, Bunker Hill Road and Long Hill Road. 2 smaller bridges need significant repair. 3 culverts, large culverts are rated poor or failing and need replacement to prevent future road closures. I don't think any of us want to see that. And Andover has 750 to 1,000 dead trees in the town right away. This is the area that the town is responsible for clearing along the roads. Okay, this graph gives you the breakout of the town funds. It's capital project funds. Not going to necessarily go through it, but if you were to look at it, you can see that almost all of it is capital infrastructure related to roads and bridges. Maybe not all, but the majority. Okay. So these are where we're breaking out the capital project funds for this year. Going to the community center, we've got $50,000. Now, we all know that's not going to get a community center or senior center built, right? But we have taken some steps forward. It's really the purview of the Board of Selectmen of the town. They've done some really good work, I think, start to lay the foundation for getting it done. But we need to keep funding this fund in order to keep that moving forward, and then we'll find a way, either for bonding or some other mechanism to get this thing done. My opinion only. I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen, but that's the Fire Department Equipment Fund. We increased that to $75,000, or funded $75,000 this year. We'll talk a little bit about what that's covering. Public Works Equipment is $110,000. Road improvement at $300,000. Sounds like a lot of money, but it won't cover a whole lot. Tree removal at $50,000. Bunker Hill Bridge work at $120,000. And other bridge and culvert repair replacement, about $100,000 for the fund there. Lastly, building maintenance at $45,000. All right, so I'm just going to talk. I'm not going to go through every slide in detail here, but I'm going to hit the highlights. Talked about the building, multi-use building fund. Board of Selectmen appointed a town committee to study the options. You've got a preliminary plan for the building behind the town hall. Some of you probably saw stakes and tape marking the location out between here and the town hall. It's kind of good to see that. The next step is to resurvey the property behind the town hall and the engineering design report. Figuring out how we're going to get it with the infrastructure, existing septic, et cetera. Hire an architectural firm and seek state and federal funding as much as we possibly can. The Fire Department Equipment Fund, $75,000 for replacing the aging jaws of life equipment. You guys have probably heard this. It's the equipment that actually allows the fire department to help extricate people from vehicular crashes, things like that. Replacing a 20-plus-year-old SCBA compressor. The compressor SCBA is a self-contained breathing apparatus that firefighters need to do to enter a burning building. It contains oxygen. You got a compressor to refill them. It's getting old. They got to have it. And then there's also a commercial washer and dryer for cleaning turnout gear. That's to comply with new regulations. With things like the PFAS problem, where some of the toxic foams get dumped, et cetera. We got to protect our firefighters by keeping their equipment clean. Public Works Equipment Fund. Okay. Starting in 2018, the CIP, the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, again, recommended a 15-year equipment replacement plan for the Public Works Department. So here's a telling fact. In 2018, the average piece of heavy equipment in town was 32 years old. So it doesn't last forever, right? We made some recent purchases to kind of overcome that, and we bought a new used sweeper and some other things. So, but these are things we have to continually invest in keep it operating and functional. Town can't afford to pay for it all at once, of course. It'll be paced over about 15 years, but we've got to keep that going. Annual replacement costs, Eric notes here, will be around $110,000 over a 15-year period. So currently, the fund is completely depleted. Okay, a little bit about the roadwork fund. We know about this. This is the fund that pays for roadwork and related repair of the 34 miles of town roads. Supplemented with state funding, which we call Town Aid Road or TAR. You see that sometimes in the line items in the meetings and discussions. What we've been doing right now is utilizing a shimming or crack sealing approach, or chip sealing on the surfaces. It's kind of the Band-Aid approach I was talking about earlier. So sometimes you drive around, you're going to see some new sections of road. That's just a patch. It's not going to last very long. It's not a complete road replacement. I live on Lake Road. This is one of the sections that was replaced last year. Already has a pretty big crack on it right down to the middle. So unfortunately, that's kind of what we're dealing with. We got some major drainage and repair on Shoddy Mill Road, and we plan to repave a section along Shoddy Mill Road. That's the plan for this year. Tree work fund, we talked a little bit about this. We've got about 750 to 1,000 dead trees in the town right away. We're going to try to catch up to it over the next 2 to 3 years, but it's not something we can afford to do all at once either. We all know we've got a lot of windstorms over the last year or so, and it amazes me, but more and more of the streets just keep coming down. And apparently it's going to continue as the age of the trees continue to age. A couple more things. Bunker Hill Bridge at $120,000. Total cost of taxpayers is going to be about $400,000. 85% of that total cost is going to be paid by federal and state dollars. So it's a good investment and it's necessary. Bridge and culvert fund, we're putting $100,000 in there. We're still working on that. It's in the design phase. The estimated total cost about $150,000 for replacement. We've got some other replacement work that needs on the culvert on Lake Road, Bridge on Merrick Valley Road, Bridge on Lake Road. All of this, those have deteriorated significantly. Are going to need a little bit of work at least. Okay, building maintenance fund. We've got a fire alarm monitoring system that needs to be upgraded. We're going to do some electrical work in the town hall, including the replacement of the electrical panel. That's ancient and out of code, bad shape. Electrical work in the Andover Public Works building to become code compliant. That's way overdue too. Replace the roof in the Public Works pool storage with $20,000. Chimney brick repair of the Andover Library, $8,000. Gutter system for Public Works, $3,000. 3-point repair damage masonry in Public Works, $25,000. Replace and relocate a 51-year-old generator for the Public Works for $25,000. Install the ductless split heat pump system to replace the wall units in the town hall. That's going to be about $70,000. And replace the electric baseboard heat in the Public Works office. Okay, so those are the expenditures. It's a lot of line items. Thank you for staying with me. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the revenue. And there's several revenue sources, but not as many as expenditure lines. So this will be a little bit, but they're extremely important. So our revenue comes from state funding, primarily the educational cost share. Sometimes in meetings you'll hear a reference to the ECS, but that's the educational cost sharing. That's the money that the state distributes to help support the schools primarily. And we also have fees for services, building permits, etc. We also have the revenue and the funds is called money from previous budgets is unexpended. This is the unexpended fund balance. Okay, so that's, if you want to think about it, this is kind of our primary reserve or our contingency fund. And we've tapped into this pretty heavily over the last couple of years, and we're tapping into it again. And we'll talk a little more about that, but this is the end of that. We just do not have those funds available to tap into for the future. So it's important for us to keep that in mind when we talk about next year and the future. Okay, so revenue source, I'm not going to go through these line by line. There's a couple that are important, have most of these items didn't really change, but a couple of them are very important. The state just recently changed the formula for the educational cost share, or the amount we get to help support our schools. And they reduced that amount after we'd already done most of the work on this budget by $67,000, to almost $68,000 for the town of Andover. So unfortunately, that's, that hit us pretty hard at the time we were trying to keep things tight. We are picking up a little more expected revenue in the transfer station funds for the fees and in the building department. Changed the pricing system for the building department fees to kind of match what's more commonly used in towns around these days. That'll help with the revenue. Our total estimated revenue, though, for the upcoming year is going to be down almost $43,000 from this year. So again, we're losing revenue just outside of everything else that's going on. So here's the other hit, and it's not really a hit, but we got a bonus last year. The Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, as you know, during the pandemic, we didn't have this process last year. It was required by the governor's orders that we just set the budget. So we did that. One of the things that we decided to do to help, again, keep the funding for the roads and everything else, keep it in place, was we dipped into the use of this fund balance. So to the tune of $780,000 last year. We don't have that money to do it this year. We do have some excess fund balance, and the Board of Finance, and together with the Board of Selectmen's recommendation, we are going to tap into our fund balance for $250,000 this year. Once we do this, we are going to be at the recommended 10% line. That's generally our target for the unexpended fund balance, which means that we're not going to have any extra to dip into next year. That fund balance built up, built up, built up, as we didn't spend on roads and everything. But frankly, that made us a target in the eyes of the state. And some of their funding things, if you have too high of a fund balance, it causes some potential problems financially for you down the road. So the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen together, we work to reduce that fund balance, offset some of these expenditures. But that is not going to be available for next year. So I just want everybody to understand that ahead of time. So that is a reduction in the amount of the fund balance that we are going to be using this year, but in some ways we're still, digging into our savings. There's some other funding that's not really reflected overall in this budget, just so you're aware of it. It does come up in from time to time to talk about it. I mentioned the Town and Road Fund. We got about $186,000 that's spent exclusively on the road work that comes from the state. We currently have, we expect to get 2 payments for the Federal American Rescue Plan. It's the federal government's pandemic relief plan. Total expected is about $319,500 over 2 fiscal years, which means that we get about $160,000 a year. But the problem is we don't know how we can spend that. It's been the way it's written right now is very restricted. It's like water infrastructure and broadband. I can't remember, I think there might have been a third thing. Sewer. Yeah, we don't have public utilities in Andover in terms of water and sewer. And I'm not sure what we would do for broadband. So we're hoping that gets a little more well-defined. And if it gets opened up a little bit, a little clarified, or if we feel like we want to take the risk, we might be able to use some of those funds for counter some of these town expenditures. But we really don't know right now. We thought it was a prudent thing to do to not factor those into this budget. Because the way it's written, it says you cannot use these funds to directly or indirectly offset taxation. That kind of hamstrings us, so that's kind of where we are. But there may be some opportunity there, we'll have to see. And we could potentially get some additional grant funding for pre-K for Andover Elementary School. So I know one of Valerie's joys of life is to try to get grants. She stated, let's see if we get there. So just a couple of things. Just what are the major changes in revenue expenses? Again, the non-tax revenue decreases $442,928 overall. We already talked about where that's coming from. The fund balance, we decreased from last year, the use of the fund balance by $530,000. In other words, we're not dipping into our savings quite as much as we did before. And then we have our spending on the other side. $172,000 increase in Andover Elementary School overall, $53,000 increase in the town non-education spending, and then about $108,000 decrease in the ramp spending. So just to summarize some of the things we talked about. So this is the budget summary. We've already hit all these line items. I'm not going to go through them. It's in the spreadsheet of the line if you pick up a copy of that. What this does leave us, though, is that the overall total by taxation that we are going to have to recover is about a 6.7% increase. That's the total increase by taxation. So what that leads us to is the mill rate. This is how much we get taxed on our homes and property. Okay. So, I'm not going to go through all the line items. When you take our total budget, reduce it by the revenue, reduce it by the use of the fund balance, some exemptions, the total to be raised by taxes is about $10 million, $10,036,000. Our grand list has gone up, so the value of the property in town has increased, which offsets, some of that tax increase we told it, in terms of the mill rate. But the end result is that the estimated mill rate is going from 35.61 to 36.97 in this budget. That's an increase of 3.83%. So just to summarize, we have a total taxation is affected by the total budget, the expenditures, offset by the revenue, and the money collected from the allocated from the unexpended fund balance. So in other words, the dipping into our savings. Town recommended budget is $12,656,038. It's an increase of $120,661. And the calculated mill rate for this year upcoming would be 36.97. Just to put that in kind of terms for those of us who are homeowners, a house that's valued at $200,000 with this mill rate would pay about $5,175 in town taxes. And this is an increase of about $190 for the current year. Okay. So that's the presentation. There's a lot of data here. Thanks for staying with us. We have a hard job. We have to make budgets interesting, so it's never easy. So at this point, we'll go ahead and give you the opportunity to ask questions. So I'll hand it over to Wally.
Okay, if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand. I'll call on you. Come up here to the podium and ask a question either to the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, or the school board. Because one can answer certain questions, the others can't. So, Georgia, you want to come up?
I could probably just talk loud. The one thing that concerns me is we're having a rebound. And real estate is off, as everyone knows. And that, have you taken that into consideration? Because going up another mill plus, and our houses will be valued higher. That does concern me.
So Georgette, what you're talking about is the reval process, because it doesn't actually go up until reval comes into effect, which will not be this year. So the increase in property values this year is not reflected in this budget or this mill rate and won't affect you. Next year, starting in October when the new grand list is out, we all know property is going to increase. What has increased pretty dramatically this year is used car values have gone up a lot, and that's because it's so hard to buy new cars right now that the NADA values for those are up, and that does affect some people's taxes.
Next question?
Down at Lakeside Drive. Is our superintendent of schools here? Valerie? I think you've done a great job. I drive by the school every day, going to work or doing what I'm doing, and I've seen our school has been open a lot. And Eric said that maybe 10 days the school was not open. So in accordance with going on in many other towns, in many other states, I think you've done an awful great job doing keeping our school open, keeping our kids teacher learning in person. So kudos to you. Now that I've said that, I'm looking at your 4.5 spending increase, and I see school enrollment down, and I'm hearing different things about class sizes. Now, how many classrooms do we actually have? Do we have 2 K through 6 classrooms?
So right now, is it okay, Will, if I answer?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I first walked. Oh, sorry. I'm usually pretty loud, I don't usually need a mic. Thanks. So first of all, I'd like to say, thank you for acknowledging that we have been open and it's been a team effort, and it hasn't just been because of me.
And the teachers as well, for sure.
It's been
Absolutely.
everybody in this building. And the parents, yes, absolutely. So, thank you. We have 14 classrooms now. That doesn't mean we have 14 staff members, we have 14 classrooms now, and that is the plan for next year. Unfortunately, yes, there has been a stagnation over the last 4 years where we've gone up a couple of kids and down a couple of kids, and we have been pretty consistently stuck where we are right now for about 4 years. So your question as far as classes, where there's 14 this year, there will be 14 classrooms next year.
And our class size is approximately,
They vary. The 4th, 5th, and 6th grade classrooms next year is 1 in every grade. So based on current enrollment, I know we're talking about sales of houses too, which we know between now and September is going to potentially affect which grades children are in. But right now, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, there's 1 of each. There will be 2 for 3rd, there will be 2 for 2nd, there will be 2 for 1st. There will be 3 for kindergarten, which we're up to 36 kindergartners for next year. And we're going to drop from 3 pre-Ks to 2 pre-Ks. So that's where the 14 will be.
okay. So our class size is approximately 20 kids, 25 kids? or-
They vary. If you get up to 6th grade, yes, you're going to get closer to that 20 or plus. 18 in a couple of grades. I knew our numbers for kindergarten would change because they are affected by preschoolers that come in. So I know that there were a lot of people in town that saw the original January numbers for kindergarten and panicked and said, we're only going to have 10 kids in 3 kindergarten classes, but we're already up 6. We're at 36 now. So they do vary. There are going to be some classes that will wind up small, with 10 or 11 kids. Depending on what grades the kids moving in at Andover are in. But then the other classes will be bigger.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Now, moving on to the operating budget, I think a 2% spending increase is more than reasonable. The capital projects, question for Eric. How much money do we have put aside for the senior center, community center, right now? Or would the Board of Finance chair on that? How much money do we have currently put aside for our
450.
450?
447.
Okay, we're gonna put another 50. And we're gonna put another 50 in this year. Okay. Now for me, I've lived here 28 years. Most of the people who've lived here all this time have been very supportive of the school projects, everything like that. We've been waiting a long time to get our own building, and it certainly wasn't the old firehouse, which was an awful place. So I'd like to see a little bit more money allocated to that. We can't add to the budget, but that's kind of an important item to all us people who live here for a long time, is to get that community center, senior center on board and up and running. My other concern is the every year tax increase we have, and like you say, the band-aiding of some of the road projects and some of the bridge projects. And I mentioned before, maybe it's time that we do have a bonding issue, since we are low bonded, and give us a couple of referendum questions, and with the town decide how they want to spend their money, whether it be on the community center or on the bridges or what have you. Just a thought. That's all I got. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Don. I'm just gonna like to make a comment, and this is more coming from me, just as a member of the Board of Finance, not the Board of Finance as a whole. But I do have to agree that if we're gonna get the senior center done, we've got to look at bonding packages. There's a couple of advantages to doing it right now. Interest rates are at historic lows, right? It's probably not gonna stay like this for long. You know, most of us have been there where we've had interest rates a lot higher. The other thing is, if we don't make some serious steps forward, if we don't just decide to do this thing, it's probably not going to get done, right? We've lived with that for several years, as Don just explained. I've also heard people talk about bonding for the roads, and I do have to say that I think we have to consider that. I don't like it, and I'll tell you why. It's like borrowing home equity, taking out a home equity loan to fix and patch your roof. If you ignore the maintenance for too long, the bonding really should be done, the borrowing should be done for projects that you cannot reasonably do in 1 year. They're just going to get beyond you, that you can't, you got to get it done, but you can't necessarily just pony it all up at that time. So I think that bonding has to be considered, and it may have to be considered for the roads because we have gotten so far behind. So I don't like that option. But I do think that probably with the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, we have to get together and maybe put together a committee for bonding and really talk about what it's going to mean to this town, find out what the costs are, find out what the benefits are, and then bring that to the community. So I do agree with that. That's what I say.
Mr. Moderator, will you allow any comments at this time or questions only?
You can make comments or
Thank you. Relative to this whole item on the income side, or revenue side of the budget, and specifically, it's the open burning issue. At least, as a landowner in town, North landowner in town, we feel that the permit fees and other related costs are discriminatory and actually add property tax, that's all. And the sort of a related question, I'm not seeking an answer at this time, but there should have been perhaps a exception for the large landowners, let's say people that own more than 20 acres or 50 acres or 100 acres. But the permit fees, and it is a problem to implement this in the process. I know no situation in town where large landowners are forced to peddle open burning, there are other accidents, but no open burning related issues. So again, I feel it's somewhat discriminatory. and penalizing the loss of landlords. That's all. Thanks for hearing.
Next. Yes, ma'am. Give your name, street address, document, if you can, please.
Hi, Marcy Minor, West Street. Great job on the detail on the budget. There's a lot here, and I really commend you for all the work. I see that it's there's definitely a lot of reductions, and things are pretty stable, and so it's really nice to see. I see you guys have done a lot of work, so it's really good. Question I had was, I saw that you said that the tax collector went to part-time, and maybe I'm confused, because I saw that the salary was increased. It looked quite a bit, so I was kind of confused about that.
Sure, I can take that. So, in the budget last year, we had anticipated reducing the position to part-time, and so we cut the budget in this current budget cycle. The problem is it took a lot longer to get, essentially union agreement, and what the employee did was the employee came back to us and said, if you agree to pay us what a kind of typical hourly wage for that position is, she would voluntarily give up health benefits. So it's an bigger overall reduction to the town, even though her salary has gone up, but her total cost has gone down. And we took that because that was a better deal than what we had worked out before.
Gotcha, thank you. I noticed that on the ground care budget, you spent $28,000, yet budgeted for $20,000. Was there a major expense that won't happen again?
Yeah, so the big thing that screwed us is we blew the well pump, and we had a lot of problems with that, and the well pump was basically the difference between the budget and what we spent. So that was it, just irrigation.
Okay. And I have no doubt in my mind that the school has been doing a great job. Our kids went here many years ago, and even though back then the class sizes were closer to, I'd say in the high 20s, 26, 28, and I can't say things are perfect, but they did great. My son is amazing how well he's doing, and my daughter's doing just as well. So I do have some concerns about the fact that the numbers have dropped and the budget hasn't. So I feel like there's probably room to reduce the budget, and you have, I don't know how many pages, 61 pages for the town budget, and then Andover Elementary School is a $4 million budget, and there's one line. So it makes it hard to decipher whether there's any transparency, and, we as a townspeople are asking to sign a blank check. I also noticed that you had said that the AHM budget was, $42,000 was taken from the school and added to the town. So that's more money that could actually be looked at as an increase that the Andover school is asking for. So I'm just asking for transparency, and I'm sure there's ways that we could all reduce the school budget. That's it.
Next. Yes, sir. and street address, please.
Daniel Foreign, 68 Stanley Drive. I would like to give the superintendent a chance to explain some of the concerns that this minor had. I've tried to reach out and explain certain things, but I think our superintendent can do a better job as to why some of the class sizes are the way that they are. As far as transparency goes, it may be one line on this sheet, but the entire budget has been on the Board of Education site this entire time. It is a very detailed budget, so that is all. And if the superintendent would like to speak on some of those points, I would like her to do so.
If you would, please.
You might have to take that second. So, we have gone through a whole process, and I really do value, is it Marcy? Marcy, I really do value the comments. I don't want to go line item by line item, but I want to tell you, I've been here for 10 months as a superintendent. And I came in before the kids even started back to school. And I am in the process, obviously, of finishing up this year with a budget that had been prepared for last year, and move forward to this year. In terms of class sizes, the difficulty is we're a very small school. And so if you have one class in 4th, 5th, or 6th that doesn't exceed 20, it's because we don't have 20 kids. So there are some classes that are not going to reach that 20 or 22 number. I do want to say there's one word that I've heard a lot, and that's transparency. And I'm glad that people are interested. But I do have to say, one of the things I noticed right away in this town being so small is Eric being in the town hall and myself being here, there are a lot of mechanisms in place that allow for there to be transparency between town and school. One of those is that we make sure that when I send checks out, Eric signs them. He knows what's going out. I know what's going out. One of them is that we have a budget hearing process that leads all the way up to referendum in a small town. So that along the way, there's 4, 5, 6 chances for people to see the budget. I understand the original question was about class size, but the word transparency keeps coming up, and I welcome anybody at any time from here going forward. A few people called me in the last 48 hours, and I spent a great deal of time on the phone with them. I was happy to, because they had questions that they couldn't find an answer to, because they went through some of these documents and said, I don't know how to read these. So the one thing I will tell you that I will make sure we do differently with those documents is I will make sure that when they print out and then I write a narrative. Because I'm finding that there are some questions that are being asked that are difficult for people to hear the answer because they're looking at the paper and they're saying, I don't understand how it's printing out. So that's on us to do next year. But in terms of class size, and I'll get this back to you. In terms of class size, I do know that on social media there's been a great big deal of discussion on that. There isn't a lot that I can do about certain grades. However, the decision in January that was made with the kindergarten, which now, as I said, we have 36 kids, was made due to the fact that right now, in Andover, yes, we've been open, but in Andover, we're still not through the pandemic. We have students that have registered for next year that have had no preschool due to the pandemic. They were home. Right now in the state of Connecticut, there's 20,000 kids that are not enrolled in school. 8,000 of them are preschoolers, and Mr. Bryan and I happen to know that 9 of them are coming to kindergarten here next year. These children have had no socialization with other kids. They can't communicate and articulate and read what we're saying and learn what normal 3- and 4-year-olds learn because they can't see our face. So that alone right there is going to cause some kids to have delayed interactions because you read people. You know you're sad because I can see it on your face. You know you're happy because I can see it on your face. And these kids haven't had that. So I had to make a decision in January that although our children are better off than a lot of other towns, I had to make a decision not to cut a teacher, not to add a teacher. That was never on the table. We had 14 classrooms. It was that one teacher was retiring. And the question was, do we give up that spot? Do we hire? What do we do? And so I said, we can't afford to cut a teacher. We can afford to cut a para, but not a teacher. We were so grateful and lucky that we have a paraprofessional in this building that is also certified to be a teacher. So we said, this is wonderful for our kids because we don't have to cut a staff member. We can move her right over. She's been working with those preschoolers this year. And who's luckier than those little guys? They're gonna have her again next year, or at least see her there. So the decision was made that we could keep everything status quo in the classroom now and look to maybe cut next year. I mean, I'm gonna stand here next year and tell you we are gonna have for first grade, hopefully, if there's the same number of kids, 2 first grades. Not 3 because we have 3 kindergartens. We're gonna move that and merge it. I am not a person who is opposed to larger class sizes. But you have to look at the kids. It has to be the right size for the kids that are in there. If you have students with needs, if you have students that have lived through COVID this year with no preschool, if you had handicapped kids, if you had students that English wasn't their first language, imagine how difficult it is to have 30 kids in a room, 28 kids in a room, when everybody has a different need. And so I am going to try to bring class sizes up, but only if it's right for the kids that are there, not if we have specific needs that need to be addressed. Because there's no person that can do that. So I'm just asking you to trust us for another year, that the class sizes are the right fit right now. And if more kids move into these grades, there is space. Just because we have 18 kids in 4th or 5th grade next year doesn't mean when we get to 19, we're gonna say, oh, we need another class. We won't need another class because those needs of those kids stay. We can have 19 kids in the classroom. So hopefully that helps.
Additional questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
Sir?
All right, it's not just about class sizes, but that is one thing. You mentioned pre-K being 36 students, or kindergarten, 36 students, right? Can't talk on my phone and talk that way. Anyway, what was my question? There are 3 classes for 36 kids, and are there 3 teachers, or are there 3 teachers and a para or 2? And what are the other towns doing? Because you sound like kids are going to need extra instruction because they haven't gone to school before. And are Hebring, Bolton, all these other towns doing the same thing, having very small classes? From what I understand, they are concerned. So maybe I'll stay here because I probably have another question.
Well, I promise to be quick because that's not the purpose tonight, and I know some of you probably haven't even eaten dinner yet. So I, first of all, will say that anybody that wants my time, please call. I'll give you an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, no problem. We can make an appointment, we'll sit and chat. I welcome that, I truly do. That's what I like about the smallness of this town. In terms of, I probably answered a lot of people ask about paraprofessionals because some people are under the assumption that we have an assistant, a para in every class. We don't. Currently, there are 7 paraprofessionals in this building, but a paraprofessional is hired for a number of reasons. They are hired because we have a child that has a need, and legally, we have a document called an IEP that says that they have to have an assistance person with them. That person, if you go into a classroom, some people will say, oh, wait, I see 2 adults in here and 10 kids. Oh, so that's a 5-to-1 ratio. Nope, it's a 9-to-1 and a 1-to-1. Because that person's sole responsibility is that one child. in the cases of special education. So if you imagine somebody who needs assistance because they have a physical disability, you can't say, well, he can't walk, but it's okay that there's two people. That person would be one person for him, another teacher would be one teacher for the other 9. So hopefully that helps, because it is sometimes you look into a room and you say, there's a lot of rooms in there, but you don't know the needs. So currently we have 7 professionals. Next year we're going to have 6, because I told you we moved 1 to a teacher spot and gave up the para. Of those 6 paraprofessionals, 2 of them are legally obligated to particular students, which means that they cannot roam the building and help in classrooms. 2 of them are legally obligated to work with our preschool program because we have guidelines to get that nice source of revenue that helps us pay for it. So that's 4 of our 6. So that means that we have 2 other paraprofessionals that will be able to work with the rest of kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. 2 paraprofessionals. So, not that it's not workable, but I know that some people who aren't in the school right now sometimes wonder, is there one of those in every room? I wish, and I'm sure the teachers do too. But that's not the case, because over the years they've had to cut them because of budget cuts. And I'm not complaining, and nor are the teachers. But it's, the fact of the matter is there's going to be 2 that float the rest of the building next year. And I'm sorry, Marcy, what was the second part of that question?
I don't know, you were talking so much, I started to fall asleep. I'm sorry, it's been a long night.
Was there another part to that question? I'd really love to answer it now.
The other question was compared to other schools.
Well, first of all, I try not to do that because it's Andover and this is not another school district, number 1. They're not the ones that are voting to pay the taxes tonight, you guys are. Number 2, I hesitate to do that because, as I said, I'm a former special education director, and every kid is different. And I'm also a multiple. I have a brother and a sister, and there's nothing the same like the 3 of us. So for us to categorize ourselves the same as Hebron or Marlboro or any other town is not fair. They have children that may have different needs. And so it's not fair. I do know what you're referring to because I was asked the question already, are other towns increasing kindergarten? No, I can tell you Hebron's not increasing the number or decreasing the number of kids because that's not their need. They didn't identify preschoolers coming in as not having had preschool. I can tell you, because I spoke with the superintendent, where they identified their need was within the classrooms for other assistance. So what they have done, that I can say is COVID-related, is they hire behavioral analysts, specialists, interventionists, and those are the people that are needed for their children to go into the classroom. So they are hiring for their need, and we are dealing with our need. So again, I do welcome you to come on in anytime. If you make an appointment with Diane King, the secretary, I'd be glad to give as much time as necessary.
I like to see things in lines. The budget, the way the town presented it was more clear. I did look at the school budget, and it wasn't very easy to understand as far as I'm concerned. It seemed like things were spelled out to you, like here's the things that you need to know, I'm sure a lot of people in this room are feeling differently, but, well, I have a specific question I have in my field is, we were talking about the tick spray on the lawn. And I don't want to go into a long thing about ticks, but you don't really need to spray the whole lawn. So I was just kind of wondering how much you spent on the tick spray, for example. I mean, maybe someone like me could help save money on that. I mean, there's all kinds of lines where people could help the school save, and it doesn't have to be like changing the class sizes. There's a lot of things that get spent that, when Manachia was the principal, he would reach out to me and ask me, you know, what can we do? And we would save money on the landscaping budget because I was always there to help him out. It's just those little things that, you know, if we picked away at every little line, we could probably help save money instead of trying to take a guess and just trust you that you're doing the best you can. I'm sure you are, but I'm sure there's ways where we can help. And I just take offense to, you know, you saying that I should have come to you before, you know. I'm sorry, but I work a lot, and, you know, it's just been very concerning, and I got involved because, you know, Jeff Murray was insulted during the meeting, so I decided, well, you know, some of these selectmen are trying to do a really good job, and they're trying to save money, and they're spending, you know, their budget looks like it's pretty bare bones, whereas the town of Andover, that's all, I mean, the school, all that, you know, I hear it's bare bones, but nobody's actually really telling you what you're spending money on. That's it.
Can I ask, please, that this not become an argument between two people? This is supposed to be run in a civil manner, and if you've got a specific question, you want to make a motion, that's fine. But we're trying to keep this on a higher plane. Additional questions, please.
So I have two questions. One, is there a dialogue between the Board of Finance and the Board of Ed and our superintendent? You've already reduced their budget a little bit during conversation. And the 4.5 just seems a little high, coming off the year we're at. I mean, has there been discussions as to whether, if this budget were to be defeated time more in the budget process, as to where reductions could take place? And my second question is, if the budget were to get defeated in either tonight or in a couple of weeks, would the Board of Finance and the Selectmen look at the possible bonding of one or more of these capital projects?
If I understood you, Dan, you're asking if we had a kind of a interaction with the Board of Education about their budget line item.
Yes.
Yeah, we did. We had, in fact, we were just kind of reviewing I was reviewing the meetings from our February 24th budget. We went back and forth quite a bit. I will say that it is, my belief is that the view into the budget this year was more clear than it had been in the past, and my expectation is that it'll be even more clear in the future. We had a good dialogue with the superintendent and I think with the Board of Ed about some ways that we can, you know, present the numbers so that they are a little more standardized in their presentation, I guess I would say. So I do agree that sometimes it's been difficult to kind of to see exactly what's going on in each area. I voiced that opinion myself during that meeting. So I do think that that's a valid concern. I don't think that it's intentional or deceptive necessarily. It just is kind of the way that things have been done. And I think it was actually a lot of data in there, but it wasn't always easy to pull that out and figure out exactly what it applied to. And we had some good discussions, and I think now that we have the combined finance director here with Sherry, there's even better communication between the town, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the AES, and I think that that's going to continue to improve. So we did look at it. We asked some questions, and you know, basically decided to make a small reduction, but to pass it on ultimately to the town for their decision. This is your budget, and this is why we're here today. So we didn't want to hamstring anybody by reducing it too much. We wanted to give the town the opportunity to make that final decision. So that's what this process is about. So hopefully that answered your question. Yeah. And as far as the bonding, again, you know, we haven't really had any serious discussions about it. But frankly, I think it's time to start. You know, we to start talking about it, what it's going to take. I'm very hesitant to commit the future residents of Andover to expenses, but we also have to maintain our house, so to speak. So I think that it's time we do need to start looking at that.
Don, to answer your question, the Board of Selectmen has started to look at bonding. We did an analysis of trying to bond for all the road work that would be required at the community center. And there was one other project that we looked at. We talked to 3 various banks in the state of Connecticut to determine what our cost would be. And Adrian Mandel is not here, and myself had those discussions to determine what our fee structure would look like. So we're looking at it, and the question ends up being, do we bond for that much road work? Because Eric's backlog is
About $4 million.
$4 million for that, and then the community center we figured was probably another $500,000. So we were actually thinking about some type of bonding mechanism where we could draw it down as we would commit to a given project. But it's going to be a cost factor. It's going to be how much extra money is incurred in interest and the other costs, or do we try to fund it out of annual deposits to the funds as we structure it? So, because that has never been done in the past.
That's not gonna work.
Well, it would have worked.
We're gonna have this every single year, and the school gets paid off next year. We've had body issues for the school, for RAM, for the fire department.
Your question was, have we
Now,
looked
we've got
at it?
different questions, and let the town decide how they want to spend their money.
Yeah. The question was, have we looked at it? And the answer is yes. Will we present it to the town? Sure, we can sit there and come back to it. But if you sit there and you look at the last 10 years, if we've been putting $400,000 away and actually doing the work, it would be a much better situation. But we may have to bond for it, and if the community is willing to incur that bonding cost, there's another mechanism that we've discussed, which is putting an additional mill rate onto the bottom of our line to say it's strictly for road work. To sit there and say, hey, listen, this is what we need to do, and this is how we do it. There's ideas.
That's a level bond group. That's not gonna work.
There are ideas out there. Well, I would put a toll on Lakeside. It would be great for me. I'd be okay. But
Mike just over that thing. They ever took care of this last year.
Derek took care of the last.
Additional questions, comments, motions?
Can I use that one because I think people don't ask. Hi, I'm Joanne Heber. I just wanted to ask a couple questions. I want to make sure that I understand correctly, because we're faced with a 6.7% increase in the dollar amount of taxes. I know that we were presented at the end that there was a 1.9% spending increase. So I want everyone to understand it's probably a 6.7, if I'm understanding it correctly. We're raising taxes 6.7% to get the dollar amount needed. Oh, I mean, I understand the whole process, but the bottom line,
We raised by taxation is a little under 6.7.
6.7%. The spending is 1.9, but there's a lot of finagling in between with tax. Okay, so overall, it's like when it's in the paper last year, it was maybe under 2% increase. You're saying we're close to that this year with the 1.9%?
The overall half budget increase is a little over 1%. Remember, we lost the revenue, and we're also not applying the.
Oh, no, I understand all of that. I just meant the percentage of taxes, not the millers.
The total to be raised by taxation will be up just a little under 6.7.
6.7%. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I said that. Okay, also, with witnessing everything that happened tonight, I just want to say from working in the school system, we should expect nothing more than what Valerie presents to the town. We should expect her to come up and really sell the budget, sell everything for the school. That's what you want in your superintendent. You want to be passionate about it. So I haven't met her directly, I've been involved in a lot of meetings, so we've emailed, but we should expect nothing less, and we did a great job. You represent everything well for the school system. Clearly, I'm not on the same side, but I wanted that to be said. So even though, I go back and forth with my beliefs, you're a great representative in public and in meetings and everything else, so the town should be proud. I firmly believe that we could afford to lose some more money from the Board of Ed budget, to whoever I'm speaking to. Just because overall, the increases are gonna keep going up and up and up, the whole budget, everything. I agree that there should be, the tree work especially is so huge. I mean, something bad's gonna happen. We need the town side to have the money, so I believe that there's cuts to be made. I know Marcy brought it up and she said the line by line. We're not talking, I don't mind which side it comes from. The superintendent's passionate and says that we need those teachers and the paras and every little thing that makes up a school. I'm an administrative assistant in a school, I've worked as a grants accountant, I've done all of those kind of things, whatever you need, but I firmly believe that the budget as presented has room to be cut somewhere. So, I work with these things all the time, I've seen cuts be made, but again, I wouldn't expect it to come from that side. It's hard to do because you want everything. So, thank you.
Okay, people are making comments and discussions and talking about reductions. If someone wants to make an actual motion to affect this budget, please make the motion. Don't just keep talking about it. Yes, sir, you want to speak?
Oh, yes, that's
My name is Jeffrey Ballard, I'm at 174 Lake Road. I've been sitting here for numerous years, and I have recently paid my town property tax, my insurance, and that's now taking 50% of my Social Security earnings, strictly going to my property tax, my insurance. I really can't afford a substantial increase. Thank you.
Shannon?
Good evening, I'm Shannon Loudon, 248 Bears Run Road. I am speaking in support of the Andover Town budget as approved and recommended by our Board of Finance. I thank the Board of Finance for their work in analyzing all of the detailed information with which it was presented and preparing this budget tonight. I specifically want those present here tonight to know some facts about a large portion of the town's budget, which is the funds needed to educate our children, because there has been a tremendous amount of misinformation being spread about this town. Fact number one, on Tuesday, Andover voted in favor of a RAM budget of more than $5 million, and we currently send a total of 223 students to RAM Middle School and high school combined. The budget for Andover Elementary School included in tonight's town budget is around $4 million for some 188 students. So we agreed on Tuesday to pay an additional $1 million for just 35 more students going to RAM. I believe we can pass a budget that includes Andover Elementary School's budget this evening. Fact number three, the student enrollment in Andover Elementary School has basically been stagnant within 15 students up and down for the past 4 years. Yet we have incurred either a zero increase or a decrease in our budget each of the last 6 years. This is the first year in the last 6 years in which Andover Elementary School is asking for a budget increase and the Board of Finance has recommended it. The precipitous decline in the student population occurred more than 5 years ago. And again, the last 4 years, the student population has stayed the same, but our budget has been decreased or stagnant. Have any of your personal budgets actually decreased in the last year? Fact number 4, Andover Elementary School is one of only a very few schools in the entire state that didn't have to ask for more money from its town to address the significant expenses caused by the pandemic. And is one of the very few schools in the entire state that has been open for in-person learning 5 days a week for the past 36 weeks, other than a brief pre-planned remote period of 7 remote days around Thanksgiving. This has been possible because of the extraordinary efforts of our teachers, paraprofessionals, administrators, administrative staff, custodians, cafeteria workers, school nurse, and because of the tremendous efforts of the parents and the students themselves. Think about that. Our students have gone to school in this school for 36 straight weeks without interruption. That is almost unheard of in the state of Connecticut in the last 15 months. That is what you are being asked to support tonight. You're being asked to support a budget increase because we haven't had an increase in 6 years. And we haven't asked for an increase during 15 months of the pandemic. That's what you're being asked to pay for. So please, I encourage you to vote in favor of the town's budget to move it to referendum. Thank you for your consideration.
Additional comments, motions? Hearing none. Without objection, when you came into the room, you were handed a ballot. Shall the budget prepared by the Andover Board of Finance for fiscal year July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022 be approved to go to referendum? If you could mark your ballot, we'll pick up the ballots and stand in recess until we can count the results. Thank you.